Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Expanse Abridged Podcast series. Today we're doing a Miller chapter. It's chapter 10 of Leviathan Wakes. So last we saw Miller, things are kind of heating up a little bit. There'd been the riots and he's kind of looking at Julie's background. Now he's kind of got the blood from that case after that mysterious message from her dad. So Julie's dad had warned her about kind of things going on in the belt, you need to come home, rather than all the drama of her mum going, "Oh, I love you, come home please." So now I'm back with Miller, and he's been kind of given that. So currently he's speaking to Captain Shadid, who's head of the Star Helix security forces, and she's pissed at him. And apparently when she gets pissed, she taps the middle finger against her thumb, and Miller knows that, fuck, I've annoyed her on this one. Very similar to the Baron Harkonnen in Dune. So in the books, he has this weird habit of tapping his fingers in a certain rhythm. That's like a tick he has where people know he's getting annoyed, which is quite a nice detail. I do remember the one from Dune. It's actually really hard to do. Frank Herbert made like a really weird way he ticks his fingers. I'll let people go find that on their own time though. So basically, Miller's saying to Shadid, "Yo, look, I want to have more look at this. I think there's something spicy going on, particularly with Jules Pierre Mouse seeming to know there was something going on in the belt." And Shadid's like, "It's a favour for a shareholder. Her father's got jumpy. There's no reason to think he meant Mars blasting the Canterbury." And then she lists off a load of other things that are going on, like tariffs going up, Eros is having trouble with their yeast farm, and there's things going off that would make any normal daddy scared for his precious little flower. And he keeps going, "Yes, sir, please," and her fingers are tapping even quicker. And it's just saying, "Yeah, mate." But he's basically realising he shouldn't be involved in this, and Captain Shadid saying, "It's not our mandate, just get me a report that says you're looking." And yeah, basically just half job it and it'll be done. And so Miller's like, "Yeah, fine," and he grabs his little pork pie hat and he leaves and heads back to his desk. And he says the knot that had tied itself in his gut hadn't loosened up, and that was too bad. And he goes speaks to Havelock, and Havelock's like, "Has she taken you off the job?" Miller's like, "No, just wants me to half-arse it." And Miller notes the desk was unnaturally clean, because obviously the last few times Miller's been doing things, Havelock's stayed at home, always been kind of there doing his own thing. So he's gone through all the paperwork, and Miller can tell from his partner's eyes and the way he moves his hands, he wants to be out back in the tunnels doing something. And Miller's like, "Right, do you want to get yourself killed or not? You've got that protein job, hopefully, so don't worry about it." And Havelock says they've got an extortion complaint from a shop. And Miller just isn't interested. So it's like Shadid has given a dog a bit of fresh meat and then pointed it back towards the kibble. The temptation to blow off the hardware shop was bloomed in his mind. Because he's basically like, "I want to do this really spicy thing for Julie Mao," because he's thinking about her, he's thinking about this like interesting case he can investigate, and he's not interested in the normal stuff anymore. And then he goes, "Bugger it, let's go do this extortion job." So they go to this place, and it's a entertainment franchise, and it says clean white fixtures offering up custom rigs for interactive environments, battle simulations, exploration games, sex. A woman's voice ulated on the sound system, somewhere between an Islamic call to prayer and an orgasm with a drum beat, which is quite fun. Again, I just love like the sex shops are everywhere. It's like half the place is brothels and the other half seems to be sex shops. And there's some 16-year-old guy behind the like stand of the shop, kind of talking about it. And he's eyeing them up, going, "What do you want?" And he doesn't like Havelock. And he's giving us some disdain. So Havelock shows him the ID and flashes his pistol. And his dad comes out, who seems to own the shop, and Miller says if he squints, he could see the 17-year-old boy he had been under layers of time and disappointment. And it's the office was almost too small for the three of them, and stacked with boxes of pornographic software. And the guy's pissed, basically. He's all about like, "Yeah, what's the point? I've already told you who he is. I've shown you the camera. I know who tried to get this money off me. It's a guy called Matteo Judd, who's a dock worker with a criminal record." And Miller's like, "All right, fine. We'll go pick him up, throw him in the can. It's fine. We need to know why he's doing this. Who's he working for? Like, why aren't you telling us that?" And the guy's just glaring at him. And there's Havelock is leaning on a box, leaning against some boxes, smiling. And the boxes are in like a Russian translation, which I just googled, and apparently someone asked this question on Reddit about 6 years ago. And it says the Lonesome Girls is what the boxes are called. And Miller's asking about this extortion. It turns out the guy's selling a private insurance plan for $100 a month, same as the last guy. and it's the price of doing business. And Miller's like, then why'd you call us if it is that? And the guy explains that the previous people who had done the extortion had stopped for a few months, and now they're back. And he's like, I thought you guys had sorted it out. And Miller's like, oh shit, I didn't realise people had stopped. And this guy explains that, yeah, the previous people of these various gangs, the Loca Griga or Golden Bow, had stopped taking it. A crawling feeler made its feeling, not a man, not a feeler, but a feeling made its. He's feeling himself in this scenario. Made its way up Miller's neck. And Havelock hadn't heard of it either. And it's basically all the organised crime is going away, and no one seems to know why. Obviously, your layman, your normal, your sheep would go, this is a good thing, but not the lone wolf Sigma male that is Miller. He's like, this is a bit weird. And he's worried, he's thinking he's paranoid. And he actually asks the guy who's been extorted upon when did this happen, and he's trying to figure out when it was in relation to the Canterbury going off, because he's starting to think, is it linked to the Cant exploding? And this new guy says he's being backed by the OPA. Matteo. And Miller leaves, he gets up the cameras and he has a look, and he can see Matteo, and he's got these big OPA armbands, and he's like, shit, so the guy who is doing this extortion is linked to the OPA, which is a bit different. And it's the same armband he found in Julie Mao's hole with her 2 sets of clothing that she owns a couple chapters back. So he goes to Havelock, like, you go back to the office, write up the report, I'm going to go and do a bit of questioning. It's best you're not there, i.e. you're an earther, and we're going to somewhere that partakes in ethnic banter. So he heads down to an OPA bar, and he thought because he's a security contractor he'd get recognised straight away, but he doesn't, and he sat there listening to the music. It says the music was pure belter, soft chimes accompanied by zither and guitar with lyrics in half a dozen languages. Which, I mean, I did once Google if there was belter music on YouTube, and I found some really weird stuff. But yeah, it's one that I'd love to hear. I can't really remember much from the TV show, the kind of music they had, but it does seem fascinating. It's better than it all being some weird stuff like electro swing, which I hope we leave for the future. But anyway, he's quite a few beers down. He's chilling on the bar all alone, and no one's speaking to him when he thought he would do, until eventually an acne-pocked man comes down and sits next to him. And it wasn't the first OPA armband he'd seen that night, but it was worn with an air of defiance and authority. Miller nodded as the bloke sat down. And he's saying, yo, Miller, do you want to join up? And the guy's like, nah, but are you the guy I'd speak to? And basically, there's a bit of like back and forth chit chat, and then Miller's like, yo, look at this guy. And shows him the photo of Matteo Judge and goes, who's this guy? When there was Golden Bow or another organisation running the area, I'd speak to those guys and explain the rules, that you can do a little bit, but you can't take the piss. And that's my job. My job is to keep the place stable. It's not to stop people bending the rules. And the guy, the acne pot man, who Miller notes is more educated than he'd expect from his voice, he's like, I don't know who the fuck this guy is. And he's basically just like, detective, we were discussing realism, what you want about all this nonsense. And he's just laughing at Miller for kind of bringing it up and implying that the OPA are doing this. And he kind of explains what the OPA actually is. It's like, we're not a criminal organisation. I'm impressed you're speaking to us, but we're not like the kind of people you think you are. We're defending, we defend ourselves against people who are perpetrating economic terrorism against the Belters. And he's referring to the Inners, obviously, in this. And he explains that the Inners look at us as a labour force, they tax us, direct what we do, enforce their laws, and he lists off a load of things they do about various tariffs or science facilities only ran by Inners but are in the belt, and stuff like that. And then Miller's like, yeah, mate, but is Matteo one of yours? And the guy's like, no, he isn't. And Miller thinks, oddly, he believes this man. The bravado wasn't there, the sense of trying to impress the world. No, this man was certain and amused, underneath it all, profoundly tired. Miller had known soldiers like this, but not criminals. So Miller's kind of happy there being, okay, this isn't the OPA. This guy's not linked to it. This guy's like just some OPA bigwig who believes in the Belter cause. And he goes, one other thing on a side note, like, do you know about Julie Mao? And the guy's like, how the fuck am I supposed to know about Julie Mao? We're a big organisation. And then Miller's like, can you do me a favour? And the bloke's like, I'm not really sure you're in a position to expect favours. It's like, no harm asking. The pock-marked man chuckled, put a hand on Miller's shoulder and says, don't come back here, detective, and walked away into the crowd. And Miller kind of sits there alone with his beers, well, alone again actually, just with his beers. He spends a lot of time drinking beers. He's done that both last 2 chapters. At least these ones he's paid. And he's had an uncomfortable feeling of having made the wrong step. And he had been sure that OPA was making a move on Ceres, and now he doesn't really know. Thinking about it was like watching a video that was just out of focus. It's too many dots, not enough lines. So he heads home, he heads back to his hole, and he puts on some music. And he puts on the music his ex-wife would like, back when they were young, and if not hopeful, at least more joyful. Again, he just hates himself, and he puts on, and he starts lying there, the lights off, drunk, listen to music, and he'd half expected Candace, his ex-wife, to appear in his mind, sighing and looking crossly at him the way she had in life. Which is just funny, because it must have been like 3 or 4 times now that he kind of sits there and goes, "Oh, yes, ex-wife, bully me." Like that sad-looking face in the memes. But instead of seeing his wife, he sees Julie, and she's a bit younger than she was in the than she is in real life, but she's the age she had when she was flying the Razorback. And he dreamed of Julie Mao laughing, and he woke up late with a headache. And he goes into the office, and Havelock's like, you look wank. What's up with you?" And he's like, "I'm just getting old and drinking cheap beer." And then Havelock steps in and goes, "Seriously, Miller, we're still partners, and honest to God, I think you may be the only friend I've got on this rock. You can trust me. If there's anything you want to tell me, I'm good." And Miller kind of blows it off. He's just like, "I couldn't find anything. The OPA are being a bit weird. They're not what I thought they were." And then he opens his computer, and there's a new homicide which topped the list. At 3 a.m, while Miller had been having inchoate dream conversations, someone had opened Mateo Judd's hole and fired a shotgun into his left eye. And Miller's like, "Shit, I called that one. Because the OPA aren't moving in on the criminals, they're moving in on the cops." And chapter ends. It's a good one there. I like that, because you're introduced to this popped man, he's Anderson Dawes, if you're familiar with the books. We'll explain in the next couple of chapters. He's like a bigwig. And it's very cool, because at the same time you're introduced to Fred Johnson, you're introduced to Anderson Dawes. And they're kind of these big boys, and you start realising that our protagonists are very much the pawns who are understanding things as they go along. And it's interesting as well, because you start seeing more about this OPA organisation. And the OPA are really like a decentralised, as kind of Fred Johnson mentioned in the last chapter, they have various councils, but there is no one leadership, and they kind of view their mission against economic terrorism. But it's just people acting independently, and it's a network, really. It's interesting as you start understanding who's kind of power and what they are and what they aren't. So you know now they aren't terrorists, and they are kind of wanting to be a government to look after people. So when someone says, "I'm with the OPA and does extortion," they will face consequences and get shot. And it's interesting you start to build it all up. And also some classic Miller action of being 1, wrong, 2, drunk, and then 3, thinking about his dead wife. And the more common one as we go forward throughout the book is thinking about Julie Mao. But yeah, thank you for that, boys. Hope you have a lovely day, and I'll see you on the next one.